welcome to another episode of the Fantasy Writers Tour Shed. I'm your host, Richie Billing, and today I'm delighted to be joined by fantasy author Rym Kechacha. Rym, welcome to the show. How are you doing?
Yeah, I'm well, thank you. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you very much for joining me. If listeners out there aren't too familiar with Rym, she is the author of Dark River, which was published in 2020 by Unsung Stories, and shortlisted for two British Fantasy Awards. Very nice. Congratulations on those. And you've got a brand new book coming out, published by Titan Books, called The Apple and the Pearl, which is very interesting story. It draws a lot on your experience as a ballerina, is that right?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, yeah.
Oh, nice. Well, I look forward to getting into that in a little bit. And one thing I really like about the book, because I've been reading it, but is the style of writing. And it's told in present tense, is that right?
Yes, it is. Yeah.
Yeah, it's really interesting. So I've seen a few books that are told in present tense lately. It seems like it's a really interesting way to approach the story, like an active way, isn't it? So I'm looking forward to getting into that with you as well. But I always like to start with the beginning, like any good story. So tell us about you and your journey through the world of writing and how you ended up where you are today.
Yeah, so I think this will probably be familiar to many listeners. I am essentially a reader got out of control, really. I was like really typical bookworm kid, like every weekend up at the library getting the maximum amount of books out. And my literary horizons were quite small when I was a kid. I didn't necessarily know there wasn't the internet, right? So I couldn't go online and be like, oh, anyone got any book recommendations? I was literally just reading my way through the shelves in my local library. And my big hitters when I was a sort of, I don't know, like sort of 9, 10, 11, 12, though the people I was really interested in was Diana Wynne Jones, who is totally foundational for me, and also Tamora Pierce. She was another kind. Those books are just really captured my heart as well. And then when I was a bit older, I loved a bit of Terry Pratchett as well. I think I've read pretty much all Terry Pratchett, and I really loved fantasy work. But I would read literally anything. Do you remember those books, Animorphs books? Did you ever read those?
Yeah.
Yeah, loved them. There was like a whole like 20 to 30 on the shelf in my local library when I was a kid. And at the same time, I was also, the other thing I really loved to do was dance, and I was really keen on ballet. And then so I became a professional ballet dancer. I went to ballet school when I was 16, and then I got a job in a professional company. I used to dance in Northern Ballet. You were just saying that you went to university in Leeds, so that's where Northern Ballet
Yeah.
were based, are still
Oh,
based.
cool.
And so and and then I wasn't really I wasn't very good, and I could see I wasn't going anywhere fast, and I just thought, I don't know if this is really making me happy. I'm not sure it's the right thing for me to do. And so when I stopped dancing, I always thought to myself, I really would like to write, but it kind of seemed outlandish. It didn't seem like I was something that I could do, like actually produce a novel of the kind that I had really, really enjoyed. So I wrote a little bit about dance. I was writing some reviews, some kind of opinion pieces around dance, and that got like some quite good feedback. And I thought, oh, this is fun. And then when I stopped dancing, I travelled for a bit, and I became a primary school trained as a primary school teacher. And then when I was working in school, it came back to me like, oh, I really, really want to write. And after a couple of years in primary school, I quit my job and I started an MA in creative writing at Goldsmiths. I went part time. I got a different job, a part time job, and did some supply teaching as well, as I was doing my MA. And I really threw everything at my MA. I had such a fun year. And towards the end of that year, oh well, throughout the MA, I started writing. I wrote a novel, which it had some good things about it, but it didn't really work as a novel.
Yeah.
And interestingly, some things are never, we can come back onto this, things are never really wasted, because although that novel didn't work, I've actually completely reworked it. It's got a whole different concept. But there are maybe five, six, seven paragraphs of that old novel
Yeah.
in the project I've just finished, actually. So, you just never know sometimes you have to rewrite the whole novel, but then the idea is still like stuck in your head, and then at the end of that, um, towards the summer term of my MA, I started writing the book that was then Dark River, what became Dark River, and that was like, when would that have been? 2017. So then I finished it, and I was kind of finished Dark River, and I was sort of sending it out to agents, and I was getting some really quite encouraging rejections. Like one agent got back to me and said, I really liked this, but I can't think of an editor I would send it to, so I'm gonna pass. But I was like, oh, that's great. Like they're not saying it's a bad,
Yeah.
not saying it's this thing, the other. And I felt really,
More like timing, isn't it?
yeah, exactly. And then so in those days I was on Twitter. In those days everyone was on Twitter,
Yeah.
and I followed Unsung Stories, which was a small independent genre breaking, genre pushing science fiction, fantasy, and horror independent publishing operation. And then they tweeted, "Oh, we're looking for submissions." And I thought, "Oh, I wonder about this." So I sent it in, and then George Sanderson, who used to run Unsung with Dan Coxon, said, "Yeah, we like it. We'd like to see more." I was like, "All right." So I sent in more, and they said, "Yeah, yeah, we'd like to publish this." And I felt very, very I felt surprised, but like, it's a funny thing. Why did I feel surprised? This is what I was trying to achieve. But I was surprised, and I was like, wow, it was great. And I wasn't really I didn't know anything about publishing. I only knew what you could find out from a cursory Google.
Yeah.
I felt like I felt like I knew a lot about books, like as in how a book. I thought then, that I knew a lot about books, but actually now I've realised I know nothing about books. And every book wants. I feel like this as a reader, and especially as a writer, every book needs something different from you. Every book needs you to come completely blank to it. Yeah, and even as a
Mm.
reader, Um, so um, so I was extremely lucky. I've been very lucky, Richie, because I just fell into George and Dan's hands, and that was a very lucky fall. That was a
Dan's a
big,
very nice guy. He's been on the
very,
show a couple of times.
and
He's a lovely guy.
brilliant. Exactly. And and yeah, and so I was really lucky about that. And so Dark River it tells a story. It's like got two entwined timelines. One of the timelines is set in like Mesolithic Doggerland, so I'm talking like 6,000 years ago. And Doggerland is this strip of land. So we used to be physically connected to the continent from about Norfolk to the Isle of Wight by a large area of sort of very fertile and very biodiverse land. So there were it was very flat. So there was like lots of forest, lots of fen land, lots of bog, lots of river systems that people would have moved across as they went on their migrations. And then there was, as the climate changed at the end of the ice age, it took a long time for that to change. So the water level rose and rose and rose. And so there's a story of a family trying to escape rising water, sort of twinned and contrasted and vibed with the story of a family escaping rising water in a kind of near future UK due to sort of like anthropocentric climate change.
Very
So
cool.
it's like kind of speculative, like in both senses, like in the we know so little about the deep past, we know so little about next week, let alone 100 years time. So yeah, it was a speculative. There were dystopian elements, but it wasn't like a hard dystopia in that way. It was more like things have gone downhill and we're already trying our best, but like it's a struggle. And yeah, and then I started writing my second book, which was it was called To Catch a Moon, and that is a secondary world fantasy based on the paintings of the Spanish surrealist Remedios Varo, who lived. She was right there at the at the heart of surrealism in Paris in the 30s. Yeah, 30s. And then because she was Spanish. She left Spain because she was on the quote unquote wrong side of the Spanish Civil War. She was a Republican. In the Spanish Civil War, it's the Republicans who are the good guys, right? To simplify it, but so she left. She was a refugee from Spain, and then her boyfriend, her partner at the time, was a surrealist poet who was kind of on the Nazis list of the bad guys. And so when the Nazis came to France and Vichy France began, she was interned by the Nazis until she was let go in a bit of a crazy set of circumstances, got herself to Marseille, and then got on a boat and to Mexico, where she stayed there for the rest of her life, and she died in the late 60s. And her work is phenomenal.
Yeah.
I wrote this novel, kind of weaving her paintings together, and then in about 2001, that was also published by Unsung Stories in 22. And then in
Nice.
2001, I started writing The Apple and the Pearl. And at that time, I did not really know, like, I didn't really know like where it was going to go or anything. And then, and George, so, post the post-pandemic world, the post-pandemic economy has been very difficult. And so George took the difficult for him decision to shut Unsung Stories and kind of so like let the seeds that Unsung Stories had kind of like nurtured grow and spread and grow. And so I was very lucky that he introduced me to be my literary agent. And then we submitted when the Apple and the Pearl was then finished. We submitted it to him at Titan Books, where he is now a managing editor. And he
Oh,
said
nice.
yes. Yay. So that was very lucky. And actually, and this goes back to the luck, because I knew in my head as I was writing, I knew that George would like the book. Now, I did not know if George could persuade the rest of the. There's a lot of steps to go through before an editor acquires a book. I didn't know if anyone else would like it, but I was I was quietly confident that George would, because George is actually also a very fine writer himself, and he will often work with this like interesting mix of mundanity and magic. Like there's something really cool about, I don't know, like invoices, and that is a concept that really interests me as well, and that is very present in The Apple and the Pearl.
Nice.
Which is, I should say what that's about. It is set in a ballet company,
Yeah.
using my experiences as a professional ballet dancer. And it's set over the course of one day in the life of this touring ballet company who perform a show called The Apple and the Pearl. And it has a structure that goes between different characters. So there isn't a main character, it's a kind of ensemble cast. So the day starts with the lighting director of the show, and then it moves to the first violin, then it moves to a principal ballerina, and we go on like that until we realize that the show is actually really dangerous because they perform for fairy creatures who are really looking for literally any excuse to kidnap one of them, somebody,
Yeah.
anybody, doesn't matter who, to take them back to the world of the fae, wherever that is, whatever that is, to probably dance and sing and make music for like all eternity. You know how fairies are.
Nice. I love the concept.
Thanks.
So, tell us a bit more about it then. So, how did you come up with this sort of concept of the train and um, performing for the Fae? I mean, what did he get for performing for the Fae? Is there a little incentive for them for doing that? It sounds pretty risky.
Yeah, exactly. That is a good question. I think I was really drawn to the idea of like, why would anyone perform? Like, it's not. There are easier ways to make money, harder ones as well.
Yeah.
But like, it can be. I think about this on like the internet as well. Like when I'm just like engaged in the mindless scroll and I see these influencers, I'm like, I wonder who is the fairy creature in the bargain with me and the phone. Am
Yeah.
I the fairy creature because I'm the audience and I'm like, I want more, go, uh, feed the algorithm more, more, more? Or are they the fairy creature because they are the impossibly beautiful person with this like impossibly beautifully tidy house, you know? And sometimes I don't know. And in this in this novel, maybe we know the fairy creatures are the audience. They're demanding more. They want to be entertained, but the also, ballet dancers are incredible beings. They're
Yeah.
incredibly graceful, incredibly gorgeous off stage and on, incredibly like rarefied. Like the training you go through, it makes you into a different person at the end, well, by the time of your professional career. So I guess there's that kind of uh, interplay. I remember in my one time when during my professional career, this would have been a Christmas season in Leeds, performing the Nutcracker at the Leeds Grand, and it was New Year's Eve, and it was the last show of the season, and everyone had somewhere to go. Like people were like, I'm going to a party, I'm going here, I'm driving home to my families, and I had a train ticket to try and catch to come back to London and go out with my friends for New Year's Eve. And for some reason, the show was started late that day. Can't remember why. And then for some reason, the show was slow that day. The conductor was slow. And everyone was like, oh, we're never going to get out of here. And then other people who had trains were like, I'm not going to catch my train, that. And then comes the curtain call and everyone's clapping. And we were like, stop clapping. We want to go home. Like,
Yeah.
go. And I remember staring out at the auditorium thinking, who are you and why are you doing this to me? How silly. It was my job. And I think I caught the train in the end. But there was this sort of sense of like demanding, but then also a sense you do feel maybe when you're performing, you do feel a little bit demanding back. Like, look at me.
Mm.
I'm here to perform for you kind of thing. So I was interested in what performing really means. And I was also interested in like one can definitely write a novel about ballet, about like kind of dreams coming true, and it's so beautiful and stuff like that. But I actually really wanted to write a novel about like people being at work because
Yeah.
you are like at work, and sometimes you're doing something difficult of your ordinary day-to-day tasks, and sometimes you're just like making a cup of tea and trying to avoid that like weird person that no one really likes to talk to.
Yeah.
And the train, I can't say where that comes from. Well, I can actually. It's from movies. Have you ever seen the film Some Like It Hot with Marilyn Monroe? Uh,
Yeah, yeah, a long time ago. I remember watching
yeah,
it with me now.
and yeah, it was that kind of film, wasn't it? Yeah, my grandparents loved it. And in that film, these two musicians like accidentally witness a mob murder in Chicago, and then the police put them on, like dress them up as women and put them on an all-female orchestra like tour, and they tour around on a train, and that just seemed so. And the train is used so hilariously in that film. It's a brilliant film. It's a masterpiece. And I always used to when I watched like the 17 times I've seen that, I always just loved the art. It like felt romantic in a sort of not just like in a love story way, but just so glamorous. And
Yeah.
I really liked that idea of like being on a train. And there is a big influence on this novel is The Red Shoes, which is a 1946, I think, film by the sort of cinematic duo Powell and Pressburger, and it's based on the Hans Christian Andersen fairy tale about the red shoes that about the girl puts them on and she dances to death, and it's set in a ballet company, and they travel around on trains, and again to get from venue to venue, and again this glamour, this sense of adventure. I just really loved it, so I knew that that sometimes you don't know where these things come from. It's only like when you're looking back, you're like, oh yeah, I could have made that choice. But it comes from you. It comes from the subconscious, the unconscious. Yeah, I couldn't say. But the
Yeah.
train was there really early in the process. Like
Nice.
when I first started writing, it was just called like ballet book. The Word document was called ballet book. And it was like train, theatre, show, who is watching, set over the course of one day, like that.
Yeah. I think what I like about the train is that it's quite a contained setting, isn't it? So if
Mm.
you've got interesting characters on there, might have characters that clash. It's like the crucible effect, isn't it? Like the forced to interact, the forced to see each other. So it does make it quite interesting
Yeah.
for the reader as well. Yeah. So I mean, the characters, I mean, play a huge part in the story because you've got so many, and it passes to each one, and there were long-standing relationships between them for being in this company. So, like, what's it like when you go through the character creation process? Have you got like a way of like getting to know these characters and bringing them to life?
Yeah, I mean, I don't do any of those like sort of some people like do sheets or something they fill out. They
Yeah,
sort of use like drama techniques of like interviewing their characters and stuff like that. And I don't really. Um, well, listen, I can only ever say that I haven't ever yet. I would never. I know I like could never rule it out. I think it's always good to have like these things in your little toolbox to be like, oh, maybe I can use that tool today, whatever.
mm,
But the first character I wrote was the first violin, Michael, who is a man who he's the second point of view character, and he is completely heartbroken because his girlfriend has left. She used to be the harp, and he was just 100% in love with her, and she has left the show, and he is very, very, very sad about that. And and I can't really say where he came from. I just couldn't say how I made him or where he came from, where any of them really came from. Apart from one of the characters, you might not have got there yet, Richie. She is the wardrobe mistress. This is about 5:30, 6 o'clock in the day. It goes chronologically through, and she's in the early stage of pregnancy and she's really suffering with pregnancy sickness. And I can say that as I was creating her, I was pregnant with my younger daughter and I was feeling horrendously sick. And I had some writing time and I sat down and I thought, I need to work on my novel.
yeah,
What am I going to write? I knew I was writing the wardrobe mistress section and I just started writing about how sick I felt. And I was like, the wardrobe mistress is pregnant. And then I kept typing, so some things, and some people say all my characters are me. And I would say in this novel, all these characters are me. Not in all my work, but in this novel, all of them have aspects of me. Some of them have small aspects of people that I've known, especially like theatre people that I've known. So, if you're drawing from life, like things are really could be simple. But I think what I had to do from a craft perspective in this novel, what I had to do, I had to get in very quickly to people and had to draw them very, very clearly, very, very quickly. Otherwise, people would be like really unmoored and they wouldn't be able to connect. And it's not a short story collection, it's a novel, but almost in that sense of reading a collection, very almost. So one of the tools I use to do that is I like kind of like a hyper specificity about the character. So if someone's not just listening to music, like what are they listening to? Like what is the track and the artist on what like hardware they put on their phone? Is it on Spotify? Is it on have they put on like an LP, and like why are they listening to that music? Is it like to relax because they love that song, to drown out other thoughts, and that like the hyper specificity and not just be like someone is listening to music. If you've got like a whole novel in one point of view, like you can maybe get away with that, like your reader would forgive that. But in my scenario, I didn't have any time to waste about just not letting, actually, like really strongly insisting that a reader make inferences like right now.
yeah.
Um, Even sometimes like where someone's described as coming from Manchester. I mean, listen, quite a few people in Manchester, but like immediately just like they're from this place, they are like this.
Like
And
the
yeah,
Happy Mondays.
is one of the is one of the ways I did that. And that's a lesson I've taken forward in my writing actually. It just to not be vague about what people are doing or what they're wearing or what they're into, and that I think really helped.
Yeah, like it is a real challenge to do that. Like the last novella I did something similar. I was eight parts, one character featured in each part, and it was like a relay race over a course of a day, like telling the story of a revolution. And it's like a collection of short stories because you do need to get into that character, show the reader who they are, what matters to them, and then um, without sort of boring them almost because you can't just info dump, can you? You've got to show like, and the way you pointed out there is clever because if you zoom in on these little things, these specific things, there's thought processes and decisions behind them, and
Yeah.
that sort of gives you little windows into the psychological makeup and what drives them and what motivates them.
Exactly. It slightly reminds me of do you remember that program that used to be on, like back in the days of sort of 4 or 5 channels? It was called Through the Keyhole, and there
Yeah.
was this bloke who'd say, I can't remember his name now, but he'd go around like a celebrity's house and point out really specific things. So there would be like specific things like the books that they had out, or like this person has a map of this country on the wall, or this like, and then the tagline would be who lives in a house like this, and so
Mm,
it's almost as though like you were like really showing a character through all of the different bits that they not just the things they have around them, but all the kind of minute choices that they have made about their physical surroundings, or just like yeah where they are, how they are, and that always makes me. That's kind of what I'm trying to do.
yeah, that's really cool. One thing I was going to ask you about was the Fae, because they really, really, well, as a whole, fairies feature massively in fantasy. And there's a real sort of great sort of thriving culture around Fae-based stories. But we've never actually spoken about Fae on the podcast. So I was going to ask you if you could give us a bit of an insight into the whole fairy subgenre and what kind of like if anyone was interested in learning more about it or were interested in including fae-based characters, like what would you recommend?
Well, a little mini reading list. I can think of 2 books off the top of my head that I really would recommend. One is Lord is Terry Pratchett's key take on the fairies. There's often he's often skirting around fairies, um, uh, but the key text I would say here is Lords and Ladies by Terry Pratchett, and he talks about um, he's really good on he calls them elves, but not like Tolkien elves who are sort of very very good. These are like elves, and they're completely amoral. And I think it's Lords and Ladies is a witch's novel, so it features my personal favorite character, obviously Granny Weatherwax, who is life goals for me, and I'm sure many listeners. And I think she says something about it's not a direct quote, but she says something about that they treat people like things, and that's when all the trouble starts, something like that. And so I was always really interested in that sense of them being really bad, but you just don't know in what direction they're going to be bad. They're just utterly unconcerned about what you think, and they're not trying to be nasty. They're not sort of deliberately trying to be ruin your life. They just don't care. You're just so beneath them, and that's my fairies are like that. I'm always the other key text is called Kingdoms of Elfin by a modernist writer called Sylvia Townsend Warner, who is also goals for me because so she lived. I think she died in sort of like the 70s, and so Kingdoms of Elfin is a kind of set of interlinked short stories, really, about different fairy kingdoms all over the UK, a little bit in France, Scottish, Irish fairies and stuff. And they're also very amoral, very glamorous, very like, not bothered about you humans. And that's quite funny. I really like her as a writer. She's extremely arch. She's hilarious and an interest, and her novels have an interesting relationship to morality and good and bad. Um,
Yes.
I'm always I'm always really inspired by folklore. So I think the attraction of working with fairies is there's so much folklore around them that is again like this kind of shorthand. So everyone, maybe not everyone, but lots of people in the know about iron, and iron is always going to be a thing when you're coming to any kind of fairy folk. Certain times of the year. So this novel, I should have said that, actually, that's quite important. This novel takes place on the 2nd of November, which is the Day of the Dead, All Souls. So it's like 2 days after Halloween. Famously, the veil is thin. Also, a fairy novel might also have something to do with the 1st of May, May Day, Beltane. These also in the British Isles, for sure, we have a lot of like fairy plants. I'm a big gardener, and herbalism is a huge passion and hobby of mine. So, uh, hawthorn plants, elder trees, these kinds of like fairy trees. There's all this folklore that one can work with, work against, subvert, include, and I don't necessarily really subvert it. I kind of include it. Salt, another one. That's a big thing in the apple and the pearl, having salt to protect you from fairies. So I really, I really enjoy when I'm reading something. One thing I think that a reader often wants to feel, readers want to feel a lot, really, when they're actively reading a book. But one of the things I think they want to feel is clever. And I certainly want to feel a little bit clever when I'm reading. I certainly don't want to feel stupid. So I
Mm.
certainly don't want to feel like, oh my gosh, I don't get this, or what's the writer doing here? I can't work it out. And so I think when you use these like um, often used folkloric things, lots of readers will be like, oh, I know about that. I know
Yeah.
where that I have all of that reference behind me. And if you don't, maybe possibly that reader doesn't, but then they'll read your book, maybe they'll like it, and then they might go on to another book and be like, oh, I remember I read about iron in that about that other book about fairies. Now I'm reading another book about fairies, and then it kind of like links
Yeah.
up, and then you become part of the folklore. And I think we're actually, we're slightly in a point now. Lots of writers are doing wonderful things with different folklores from different parts, different lands. And we're at a point now like where the writers are not just inspired by that folklore, they're taking part in it, because that is
Mm.
what folklore is. It's like it's using the tradition and like forging your own new link in it, becoming a new link. And actually, so people are doing more than just being inspired by it. They're actively creating it for a new, exactly, a new generation. Yeah, a new generation, but more like a new kind of a new world, and bringing it forwards into new worlds. That is what folklore is. Uh, and I try to take part in that process.
Nice. There you go. Very good explanation of the fact.
Thanks.
One thing I wanted to ask you about was the style in which you tell the story, because it's all written in the present tense, which for me, writing, I think I would struggle because I'm so used to third person. But is that your sort of go-to style when you're writing things, or is it something that you've come to love over the years?
Yeah, it is. It is. All my books have been written mainly in the present tense, and I don't feel like triumphant about that at all. I feel like it's actually maybe like a skill issue, because I'm maybe using it. This is my deep dark worry, right? One of the many. That I may be using it as like a cheap way of creating tension, propulsion, immediacy, that actually in a more skilled writer could be doing that even if they were in the past tense. So I
I
have
don't
some.
think that's fair.
Thank you, I appreciate that. And there are like some big beasts of fiction who are like, I would never write in the present tense. It's like not acceptable story tense. And indeed in other languages, like when I stopped dancing, I went to live in Italy for a year. I was an au pair in Rome, and I learned some quite rudimentary Italian. But in Italian, you have a sort of, as I understand it, you have a sort of like literary tense that you wouldn't use this tense to speak to somebody, you would only use it in a kind of storytelling vibe, and it is a past tense. It's a form of past tense. So I wonder, like, if you're an Italian writer and you do want to use the immediacy of the present tense, uh, um, how does it that also contain like an informality as well,
Mm.
because you're like using a spoken tense in a written text? In English we don't have to contend with that, but that sometimes like that would be an interesting nuance that is available in other languages. So yeah, I just tend to find that works, and I am so yeah. All my three novels have been written like that, and I don't. Maybe it's a yeah. I'm still formulating my thinking on that, as I am on so many other issues as well.
I do like it. It's refreshing because you don't see it very often. And I think there is a real skill involved in writing it. So hats off to you, especially your novel length. I could give it a go for a short story, I reckon. But
Yeah,
like I say, I'm so entrenched. I was writing a short story the other day, and it was in first person, and I don't really do first person. I do enjoy writing in first person from time to time, but every now and then I just found myself slipping back into third person. I had
yeah,
to go back and correct myself in a cursing. But
yeah,
yeah, it's like I say, everyone's got their own preferences, and that's one of the best things about writing because everyone does it differently. So I was asking you about your writing process as a whole. Are you more of a planner? Are you more of a pantser? Or what kind of approach do you take when it comes to the process overall?
So unfortunately for me, I don't really have a set process. All my books have been different,
Yeah.
and um, so Dark River I wrote linearly, and I planned. I had it uh, like a notebook with all my beats and like what was going to happen in like all the different parts of the story, and I followed that, and I knew what I was writing. I wasn't discovering anything. I was really just kind of moving through the beats that I had planned out, using a lot of like story structured books, Hero's Journey, that kind of stuff. Even though I find some of that quite problematic, particularly Hero's Journey stuff. But it's one of those things where you gotta like, I almost find it one of those things where you got to like know the rules to break them, or know the rules to bend them, or whatever you're going to do with those rules. Gotta know them first. And then To Catch a Moon, uh, and then I realized actually I'm a vibes based writer, and actually
Mm.
Dark River was 20,000 words of vibes before it managed to find a plot, which is now where I am at with my current project. I'm at 30,000 words of vibes, and a plot is like slightly emerging.
Mm.
So yeah, To Catch a Moon, I wrote non-linearly. I literally just like wrote, like looked at a painting that I thought was fun, and then like wrote about it, and then I sort of stitched the bits together. And then that went well though. That wasn't, because lots of people can say like if they're a pantser, like they get to a point where they're like, I don't know what to do, and that didn't happen with Sketch and Moon. It completely flowed. I was almost like there were. I don't expect this to happen to me again writing. I was like felt like I was sometimes like taking dictation,
Mm.
and yeah, that was a very nice process. And then with To Catch a Moon, I didn't really plan it. I had bones, I had a structure. I knew that it was set over the course of one day. I knew I was going to have an ensemble cast. Um, and I knew like the beats of the day, like what was going to be going on at what part of the day, if you see what I mean. But
Yeah.
I didn't necessarily know what character would take each beat, if you see what I mean. Uh, each beat of the day, by which I mean, setting up the stage, ballet class in the morning, some rehearsals, um, sorting out the costumes, act one, act two, act three, sitting down, packing away the stage. That's what I mean by the beats of the day.
Yeah.
And so I didn't really plan that either. And then the novel I've just finished, uh, also vibes, lots of vibes until quite late on actually, and then there's like sort of like, oh okay, I think there might be some plot here. So no, I don't really plan, but I wouldn't exactly call myself a pantser either. Uh, the way I think about it, is that I've got like there is a road. I just don't necessarily know it yet. And you know when you're driving at night and you've got full beam on,
Mm.
how I feel. I'm not. I can see a little bit ahead, and I also know there is a road. I just can't see the road. Um, and I've got full beam, and I can see a little bit ahead of me. That's how I tend to.
And you've got your destination.
And I've got my destination. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Um,
I think that's a really fun way to write, to be honest. That's the kind of approach that I've kind of settled with. Because sometimes if you plan too much, it becomes too predictable.
It
And
does, but sometimes
yeah.
I've read a couple of books recently that have just had, and they have actually, to be fair, been mysteries.
Mm.
So the bits I'm thinking of, they've been quite big books recently last year. Oh, one won the World Fantasy World and also Hugo is The Tainted Cup by. Oh, I can't remember his name, but if you Googled The Tainted Cup, you would find it. And it's the first in a trilogy, I believe. I haven't read the second one yet, and it's a mystery. And the plotting is absolutely immaculate. And the second was The Raven Scholar by Antonio Hodgson, and that was also a mystery, sort of secondary world fantasy mysteries, but the pair of them, and they were immaculately plotted, both of them. And I
Mm.
don't think you would manage that, and unless you were really like plotting and hitting those beats and then like moving sections to be bigger or smaller to hit those beats. And
Yeah.
there was such a satisfaction in both novels of like almost like of the
Yeah.
plot working underneath you, and you knew that that was it was very very satisfying. So
Yeah.
i I wondered, I think you would have to be a plotter, but then that would have a certain almost like a sense of constructing a puzzle, a puzzle to be solved.
Yeah.
There's a different kind of pleasure in it, I think, for the construction.
I always thought that as well. Like I read a lot of crime. I love Ian Rankin. And I went to see him do a little talk in Liverpool last year. And he just came out, I'm a complete pantser. So
Mm,
like,
yeah.
and his latest book, it was and well, the final scene is where he began, and it was a closed room murder, like
Mm,
in a prison. He said, I had no idea how that was going to happen, how that could happen. But that was the point of writing the story, was to find out. So he just a complete pantser, which blew me away because I agree with you. I'm like, if you're writing these really technically sort of woven stories, you've got to at some level be like joining the dots together. But
yeah.
you never know. Like I say, everyone's different, and like, people can keep track of these things in their heads.
Yeah.
Fair
Yeah.
enough.
Yeah.
But yeah. So, I've got one more final question for you. Always one I like to end on. So, we've got a lot of new writers listening to the show. So, if you had to give them one piece of advice and they're starting out now, what would be your biggest takeaway for them?
And there's like loads of things jump to my mind, but I'm like, oh, what's like the one thing? Okay, so like I've kind of got like two things really.
Yeah, buy one
One's
get one free.
yeah, yeah. One's like a bit more of like a craft thing, and one's a bit more of like a mindset thing. One the mindset thing is like to back yourself as an artist,
Hmm.
and which I never did as a dancer. I didn't back myself as a dancer. I was kind of like I was like in the room, but I didn't feel like I should be there. To be fair, I probably shouldn't have been, but like I just didn't back myself. I didn't um, work as hard as I could have to be as good as I could have been. And I don't necessarily regret that because my life has like gone in different directions and things like that. But I would regret it if I let that same mindset come into this second creative career that career is maybe a bit strong, the second creative like vocation. Um, and so now as a writer, I try and back myself. It's very, very hard to be honest and clear about your own work. Very, very difficult. It's actually, and then the more you write and the more you read, you realize it's actually quite difficult for anyone to be honest and clear about anyone's work because taste is so individual. The market is not individual. People's is not the market is not necessarily an agglomeration of everybody's tastes. Like those two things are often like
Hmm.
it's the Wild West out there. I don't think it's ever been any different, to be honest. So yeah, like back yourself, and then slightly like wound into that is that don't be upset with yourself if like not everything you write is going to be published or nothing is ever wasted. And when I was doing my MA, there was like a visiting lecturer who said like, when like the best pianist in the world sits down to practice the piano, they're not always sitting down to perform, they're not always sitting down to record, they're not always sitting down that someone is gonna like think this is amazing. Sometimes they're just doing
Mm.
themselves, they're like vibing for themselves. And sometimes when we're writing, that is what we're doing. Sometimes it's just piano practice. Sometimes you've written a whole chapter, it's gonna get junked.
Mm.
For many different reasons. Maybe it's bad writing. Maybe it just doesn't fit in the new plot that you're going with. Maybe it doesn't, maybe you write a whole novel and it doesn't go anywhere. That's happened to me like a couple of times. It's happened to everyone,
Mm.
any writer. And it's just piano practice. You need to no other artist sits down to do their thing expecting that this is going to be everything that drops from their body, from their instrument, from their pen is going to be incredible. And then my second okay, and then my craft piece of advice is actually to return to what we said, what we were talking about before, is be specific. Like I don't want to read about flowers and birds. I need to know like what flower is it, what bird is it, what was the other person eating, and what does that tell us about the character, the world, the situation, the feelings, all of that kind of stuff. Yeah, that's my craft advice. Yeah.
Yeah, fantastic pieces of advice. Definitely one to take away and put into practice. And I agree with this. Being specific is a really powerful tool. Very simple, but
Yeah,
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 it's always a good one to think about when you're editing, going
exactly.
back and asking, can you be more specific
Exactly.
than
And
this?
then
Yeah.
like all rules are meant to be broken. And then if you are talking about flowers and birds, like in the kind of abstract, be aware that that creates a certain tone and a certain vibe that you can work with. If that's the vibe that you're going for, then go with that vibe.
Yeah. Brilliant.
But then that then you are using those words with specificity as well.
Yeah. There you go. Ria, thank you very much. It's been an absolute pleasure talking to you and wish you the very best of luck with the Apple and the Pearl.
Thank you very much. It's been really, really lovely to talk. Thank you.
If anyone wants to learn more about you and if they want to get the book, where's the best places to go?
Yeah, so you can get the book anywhere books are sold. And we can get it on the Big Bad River site. We can get it at Waterstones, Barnes and Noble in the States, bookshop.org, your local independent bookshop, all these guys. And you can find me on Instagram. I am the world's worst photographer and the world's much worse, even worse than that, like making all the short form video that is attaining world domination. But I am on Instagram and under my name, Rym Kechacha, and I'm also on Blue Sky. And yeah, that's me. Oh, I am also on Substack. I have a newsletter. That's
Nice.
You
There
can
you
find
go.
that on Substack if
I'll
you.
put all the links in the description. You can
Thank you.
find you there. Thank you very much again. And everyone at home, thank you very much for listening. Thank you for listening to the Fantasy Writers Toolshed. If you'd like to join our writing community on Discord and get access to fantasy writing classes and books on Patreon, check the links in the description. And if you don't want to miss any future episodes, be sure to follow or subscribe. And to support the show, leave a quick rating on Spotify or iTunes and share this episode on social media or with anyone who you think may be interested. Thank you very much for listening.